Dak Prescott is done for the year, and Caleb Williams is getting a new play caller. We discuss the latest news, react to last night's game, and give you our waiver wire ranks on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is sponsored by Ultimate GM. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL, all capitalized, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your franchise. We have a lot to discuss today because we had some news drop this morning about Dak Prescott and the Bears, coaching staff. And then we have last night's game to get to. And then plus waiver wires are due tonight for everybody. So we have to give you our rankings and our streaming plays as well. Let's start with last night's game, though. Kind of boring. Like the defenses both played well. A lot of bad fantasy performances. Achane didn't do much. Waddle, I guess, had his best game in forever with 3 receptions, 57 yards. Tyjae Hill finally scores a touchdown, though. There was that. But only had 3 targets, 16 receiving yards. What are your thoughts on Tyreek Hill's performance?
Yeah, it's another weird game for the Dolphins offense. Tyreek Hill would have been a total flame out without that touchdown. I mean, he's kind of saved some of his value, but still not what you're expecting from Tyreek Hill in one of the better matchups in the league here against the Rams secondary. So it's just concerning how little they're throwing the ball in key spots here. They got one big play early to Jaylen Waddle. Then they had that bizarre rushing touchdown from Malik Washington that kind of killed everyone's value there as a big play. So I'm not quite sure what's going on with Mike McDaniel. It's just been all over the place. We can just hope if things really do not happen for everyone in this offense against the Raiders, and we don't see that offense that's capable of scoring 70 points that we've been waiting for multiple weeks now, then I would really concern myself. But again, the Rams have been improving defense. We kind of were on that a little bit, telling you that they're playing better each week. The Dolphins were also a tough defense on the other side. That led to a low-scoring game, and therefore the Dolphins is kicking field goals and not needing to worry too much and not force the ball downfield. So the Raiders could also offer that. I will say this, that they could run all over the Raiders and not get big plays. But I think this Dolphins offense needs a get-well game for the passing game if they're going to get hot down the stretch and try to make a late surge in the wild card.
Now, for Matthew Stafford and the Rams, Puka Nacua had a good game, 9 for 98. Even Cooper Kupp, he didn't get the touchdown, but 7 for 80. You're fine with that. Kyren Williams, a little bit disappointing for him. He only has 82 total yards, but he has the 5 receptions. So if you play in a PPR league, it wasn't the worst game for him. Stafford, though, on the other hand, had a really bad fantasy day with 0 touchdowns, 1 interception. I think Stafford, it just isn't usable for fantasy. I don't care about he'll have 1 or 2 good weeks throughout the year. He's already had just 1 throughout this entire season for fantasy. I'm off of Stafford for fantasy at all, but you can keep playing Nacua and Kupp and Williams, and that's about it.
Yeah, you have to see if they're going to add up to a good day, and I think they could have had a much bigger day. I mean, you had Nacua getting 14 targets. Actually, Kupp came down with all of his targets in the game, and that's why the production was very similar for both of these guys in the game without a touchdown. So Stafford, you might, I don't know if you're desperate in a deeper league and you have Kyler Murray on a bye or someone like that, Baker Mayfield, potentially, you could look at this matchup here at New England and say, okay, if the receivers can come through, hopefully Matthew Stafford can. But I think more likely what's going to happen is Kyren Williams goes off against the Patriots run defense.
Now, I brought up at the top of the show, Dak Prescott is officially going to have surgery and be done for the season. It just looks so bleak for this Cowboys offense. We saw what Cooper Rush and Trey Lance did last week. It was nothing. I just it was already a mess kind of with Dak Prescott, right? This offense. It's not going to get better with the backups. And this is their schedule. They face the Texans, Commanders, Bengals, Buccaneers, Eagles, Commanders, and 6 of their final 8 games. They have 2 easy games in there against the Giants and Panthers. But like, just what do you do with this offense? I guess you're just struggling with CeeDee Lamb and then ignoring the rest of the pieces.
Yeah, that's basically what you said. And then you look at the Giants and Panthers. I don't think any of these games are easy for the Cowboys going forward, because at least those teams have a little bit of uptick right now. They're healthier, where the Cowboys seem to just be going through the motions. I don't get it. CeeDee Lamb complaining about the sun. Look, they're playing a night game against the Texans. The Texans will be probably upset. They've lost 2 games in a row in tough fashion to the Jets and Lions, so I don't see any value of the Cowboys. Now, Cooper Rush was a super sub a couple years ago, but I will stress that's a couple years ago. It's over. We'll see if Trey Lance can spark them. I doubt it. So stay away from all Cowboys, and you're just going to have to accept CeeDee Lamb drops into wide receiver 2 territory.
Yeah, he'll still get his targets. And maybe last week, after everyone's hating on him for dropping that ball, seeing the sun, he'll step it up for his team and play like he's getting paid, right?
Yeah.
He should still be able to give you some good fantasy weeks. Now, the Bears finally fire someone on their coaching staff. It should have also been Matt. Oh my goodness.
Eberflus.
Matt Eberflus. But right now they just start with their OC. They fire Shane Waldron. Then they promote, actually, which is funny, they promote Thomas Brown as their play caller. He actually took over as a play caller for Bryce Young last year for the Panthers once they fired Shane Steichen. No, once they fired Frank. Man, I'm messing up all of these coaches. Yeah, Frank Reich.
How should we forget?
I will say Thomas Brown didn't help Bryce Young whatsoever. So I don't know how much optimism we have around here. I don't think anything's going to get better until they completely clear house of all their coaching staff. But the Bears have currently gone 23 straight offensive drives without an offensive touchdown. So they had to do something. But the schedule is just way too tough to even care about this offense in fantasy. Packers, Vikings, Lions, 49ers, Vikings, Lions, Seahawks, Packers. Besides the Seahawks game, like, so tough.
Yeah, I think the thing that happened with this Bears offense that didn't count on was DJ Moore just falling flat. I mean, they paid him a lot of money, so they expected him to act like a number 1 receiver and help their quarterback. And he's not doing that. He's not playing like that receiver. So that puts a lot of pressure on these other guys. And what I think you'll see going forward, I hate to say it, you'll see a lot of this conservative stuff to Keenan Allen and Nicole Kmet. It's not exactly what Bears fans want, but I think that's what they need to do right now. Because Rome Odunze is a rookie. Moore is just, I don't know what he's doing, where his head's at right now on this team. So I could see Allen being very involved because Thomas Brown, we know they got Adam Thielen quite a bit involved out of the slot last year. So it could be a lot of the Keenan Allen volume receptions, get the ball out of Caleb Williams' hands quickly, right? That's probably going to happen. So there was 2 ways they could go. They could go the Moore and Odunze route, but now I think they're forced into throwing not only to Kmet and Allen on shorter routes, but DeAndre Swift. So I think that's what you'll see mainly from this Bears offense, just to get Caleb Williams to get in a rhythm, get comfortable, and not get sacked so much. 9 times against the Patriots was horrible last week, and the Packers have a good pass rush this week.
Yeah, it's just maybe like anytime there's a coaching change, it seems like the players play up and maybe they have one good game, but I'm not taking that risk. Now, there is some talk about Daniel Jones might be benched for the Giants. It's really looking like that could happen. They have a week 11 bye, so this would be the time to make the change if you're going to do it. Now, I mean, they're making the change to Drew Lock, who has been terrible his whole career too. So, but he has a great stretch of games if he wants to, revive his career. It's the Buccaneers, the Cowboys, the Saints, and the Ravens. The next 4 games for the Giants. Hopefully, Drew Lock can be better from Malik Neighbors. That's what we need, right? Because Daniel Jones has been targeting Neighbors like crazy. It's just the efficiency is so terrible. Lock hopefully continues to target Neighbors and get some touchdowns. That's really all that matters. I'm not thinking about starting Drew Lock in fantasy.
Yeah, I think Drew Lock, one thing about him, he has a big arm and he's fearless to throw, and that means he's going to put up a lot of balls deeper to Malik Neighbors. So that's the one thing that's going to happen. Now, you might lose some check down love to whatever you were getting with Wan'Dale Robinson or Theo Johnson. You may not get that as much on this team, but again, the strength so far has been the Tyrone Tracy running game and a little bit of Devin Singletary on this team. You just need someone who can put the ball in Neighbors' hands deep. And I think Drew Lock, I'm not saying it's like Russell Wilson taking over for Justin Fields, but he's at least a guy that's going to pop it up and get it to those receivers a little bit deeper.
It is time for us to transition to our waiver wire priority talk. We'll give you our favorite running backs and wide receivers to pick up this week, plus end the show with quarterback, tight end, and defensive streamers. All that coming up right after a quick break.
We told you at the top of the show that this episode is brought to you by Ultimate Pro Football GM. It's a great partner to have here in Locked On Fantasy Football because this is a different form of fantasy football. You get to run your own team. They're back. They have added amazing new game mode. We need to tell you about the game that has you step into the shoes of a football franchise DM and lead to glory. Now is a new head coach career mode. So on top of getting to build your dynasty by drafting players, signing free agents, and hiring coaching staff, now you also can call offensive plays during games as well. So that's great. You'll dig the new tools that you can work with, such as individual training camps and upgraded negotiation systems. So this is fun and realistic, and this game just got a lot better. If you already have it installed, be sure to do an update so you can try out the new mode there with Ultimate Pro Football GM. If you don't have it, good time to download it. It's a must-have for all football fans. We love it, and we know you will too. Ultimate Pro Football GM is completely free, has no ads, and 100% playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. And here's a special offer for Locked On fans. Use the promo code Locked On NFL, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your franchise. Make sure to get it, as this perk will jumpstart your play and give you the advantage you'll want in creating a dynasty. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com, ultimate-gm.com, or look it up on the App Store. That's Ultimate Pro Football GM. Start your dynasty today.
Tackle the NFL action with FanDuel's America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers get $5. When they bet $5, you get $150 in bonus bets if you win. That's $150 in bonus bets if you win on a $5 bet. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. One bet I'm really liking this week is the 49ers -6.5 against the Seahawks. Every time that Brock Purdy has started a game against the Seahawks, the 49ers have won by at least 8 points, even including their playoff game that they had. So again, that's 49ers to beat up on the Seahawks -6.5 at home. Just visit FanDuel.com today to get started. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Let's start at the top here for our waiver wire priorities with running backs. Now, there's not a lot of great options, right? So we're going to remind you, check on Jaylen Warren for the Steelers. He's still available in half of leagues. They have a tough schedule coming up, but that means that Warren has to get more involved because it's a tough schedule for like the up the middle running backs like Najee Harris. But they pretty much split carries this last week in Najee and Warren. And Warren got 14 carries, got both the targets in the backfield. So I think Warren's a really solid pickup moving forward if he's still out there.
Yeah, and he had a chance at that score that didn't quite work out. So I think you look at Warren, and yeah, they need to use him a little bit more. I mean, you look at this offense, it's opening up things. We saw Pat Freiermuth score from tight end, the deep balls, making the intermediate game open up a little bit because everyone's afraid of Russell Wilson beating them with moon balls and have to worry about that downfield. So that naturally opens up the running game, the outside there in the flat there for the running back, and that's really good for Jaylen Warren. So, again, you can't run on the Ravens, but you can throw a little bit on them on the outside of the running backs. We saw Chase Brown eat them alive there in coverage in the previous game. So that's a really good spot for Warren this week if you want to plug and play him after you pick him up.
Tyjae Spears is an option on waivers, and he did, he gets 7 carries to Pollard's 9, 47 rushing yards, gets 3 targets. He outproduced Pollard this last week and is getting a 50-50 share. I will say, though, the next 2 weeks that the Titans play, they get the Vikings and the Texans, 2 hard teams to run against. So I'm not like that's a desperation play for me. One guy I would actually rather pick up is Audric Estime, the rookie for the Broncos, who's all of a sudden looking like he's taken over the lead back role in that backfield because, Javonte Williams just isn't living up to what he should be. But in a tough matchup, he gets all the work in the backfield. 14 carries, doesn't do much with 53 yards, but 3.8 yards per carry. Again, super hard matchup against the Chiefs. So I think moving forward, if he's going to get this work, he could be a really like sneaky grab off of waivers right now.
Yeah, I think he's the play if you're just looking for a stash, right? You're looking down the stretch. I don't think you can go feel great playing him against Atlanta. If you're okay, and they're better against the run, and I think they're going to have to put the ball up a little bit with Bo Nix this week. So that's one thing. So if you're a little bit desperate and maybe you've been playing one of the Bucs running backs, Rashod White or Bucky Irving in the flex spot, or any of these guys, or even forced in a deep league to play Michael Wilson or somebody like that, you could plug in Tyjae Spears, only because here's how I look at it. The Vikings could crush them, and there's going to be some garbage time, I think. And I think they're going to maybe do the split where Spears should be on the field as a kind of the change of pace and receive. Now, I don't like him in non-PPR formats because you're not going to get anything for anything he might get in the passing game. But again, if you're desperate, Spears is the short-term guy. I think the bigger thing with Spears also, Michelle, you're worried about Tony Pollard all of a sudden. If you've been a Tony Pollard manager and enjoying all his volume, they thought, okay, this chestnut guy is not doing anything. Spears is back, who can cut into his workload.
Yeah. And then two other guys, just look at your handcuffs, your insurance policies for whatever running backs you've been counting on. So if that's James Conner, pick up Trey Benson. If J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, Kyron Williams, Blake Corum, just make sure, like, we're getting too late in the season now. You can't lose that your starting guy and not have their backup, especially when there's such a clear, concrete backup behind them. Let's move over to wide receivers, because these are really the better pickups, right?
Yeah.
There's more options. There's guys who can actually put up points for you this week. Now, I want you to rank these 4 players who all had good weeks in week 10. Quentin Johnston, he gets the Bengals this week. Ricky Pearsall, who gets the Seahawks. Alec Pierce, who gets the Jets. Or Marquez Valdez-Scantling against the Browns. I know my order, but I want you to give yours first.
Yeah, if I'm going to trust somebody to make a big play and based on the matchup, I actually think it's Marquez Valdez-Scantling against the Browns. They do allow the second most points to wide receivers in fantasy, and they give up a lot stretching the field. We saw that a couple weeks ago before their bye against the Chargers with Quentin Johnston and Josh Palmer scoring on home run plays. Well, that's what MVS does. So for this week only, I go with MVS. Then I like Quentin Johnston. I just want some piece of this game on the outside because I think there's going to be a sneaky high-scoring game on Sunday night between the Chargers and Bengals. So I want some guy who scores, and Quentin Johnston is that. Then I'm going to go – I think I go Pierce and Pearsall in that order because I'm not sure how much they're going to need Pearsall in this game. It's a home game. Deebo Samuel, as you mentioned, they usually crush them. So it could – is there enough mouths to feed, right, for everyone in this particular smash game where McCaffrey could blow up? And then Alec Pierce, if you're desperate, I look at him and say, look, the Jets are – tough secondary, have been. It's the question of how much do you believe in the Jets' defensive regression versus how much do you believe in Joe Flacco and Alec Pierce on the road in this matchup. So they're all a bit of crapshoots to me, but that's how I would look at them this week.
I'm definitely going Quentin Johnston first here because it's not only just for this week. He also gets the Ravens the next week. So 2 great matchups in a row. It is risky because, again, like last week, he only got 2 targets. He just happened to get a touchdown, but he played on 83% of the Chargers snaps this last week. That was the highest percentage for him of the year. So it looks like they're starting to believe in him a little bit more. I want him in that matchup that should be like they're going to actually get challenged on the other side for once. And then for a pickup for the future, I want Ricky Pearsall. I think he's a good pickup. The Seahawks, like I mentioned, they can be beat. Brock Purdy always kills them. So he can put up points in this game. Would I feel better about Marquez Valdez-Scantling putting up a big game against the Browns? Sure, but that's also Marquez Valdez-Scantling. He could also give you 0 points. So MVS, I'm kind of leaving more to just a DFS play with that high upside in that matchup. Alec Pierce, I'm not touching in this matchup against the Jets. I just don't really care. I know the Jets haven't been as dominant as usual, but I'm not risking that. So he would definitely be my last choice there. There's 2 other guys of interest for wide receivers on the waivers. They're in the same game this week, actually. Rashod Bateman, he's been having some decent weeks. I mean, also down weeks, but he's been used way more in this offense than in the past. Or Mike Williams against the Ravens, who we know are giving up so many big chunk yards and points to wide receivers this year. Which way are you going?
Well, for this particular game, I think I have to go with Bateman only because Williams, again, he had a touchdown, but it was one catch last week. So could that happen again? Certainly, it could happen again against this Ravens secondary. But am I totally counting on that? I want to see him a little bit more involved because there's a lot of other players that are in this passing game now that we maybe overlooked that are having a bigger opportunity there with the Ravens. Again, we'll see about the injury. If you have Isaiah Likely out again, that's good news for Bateman because he'll be used. You figure the coverage will roll till Zay Flowers. So again, it's hard to trust another Ravens or Steelers receiver. That's the point of this exercise. But if I'm going for someone who can give me some wide receiver 3, like basic floor play, I'm going with Bateman. If I'm looking for big upside, boom or bust, I go with Williams.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's Bateman in a regular league. If you're playing in DFS, again, like Mike Williams, I'm down to throw in there. It's like the only reason Mike Williams was even in there in that play he caught was because Calvin Austin got hurt on the play. It seems like Calvin Austin's going to be back, though. I do think Mike Williams is a better player, but it's going to take him some time to earn that playing time. So going with Bateman as well, I think he's a solid pickup even for the future as well. We're going to get into our favorite streaming quarterbacks, tight ends, and defenses for week 10 to finish today's show right after another quick break. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by the Game Time app. Buying tickets to your favorite event shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. I use this app all the time when I'm buying tickets, and for many reasons. I get a panorama view of my seat before I buy them, so I know exactly what to expect when I arrive. I don't have to be disappointed when I sit down. I know what my view is going to be of the event I'm going to. It takes me seconds to buy the tickets, and that's a big thing for me because I'm highly impatient. 2 taps and you're set. And then they have the best ticket coverage in the business in case anything goes wrong. They have the lowest, they have event cancellation protection, 24-hour return guarantees, job loss assurance. You get to take the worries and the guessing work out of buying tickets with Game Time. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. I think there's one clear best streaming quarterback available this week, and it's Russell Wilson against the Ravens. Russell Wilson has had 2 good fantasy weeks out of his 3 starts. The Ravens are allowing the most passing yards per game and passing touchdowns in the NFL this season. And we know that Lamar and the Ravens are going to be able to put up points against the Steelers, so he's going to have to throw quite often.
Yeah, and I like that he got Warren involved a little bit. He's got Pat Freiermuth involved. So now we can know he can attack where the Ravens are weak in the middle of the field, that soft zone. They're going to play protection against the big play, right, and hope to contain George Pickens. I don't think they have the guys to do that. Anyway, on the back end, so Russ Wilson, everywhere you look at this matchup, it's fantastic all around. I think this last week you'll probably see Russell Wilson available in more than half of leagues. He's just been too good. He's producing. And the Steelers, I know their schedule gets a little trickier down the stretch, but man, I think this offense has kind of clicked a little bit in what they want to do. So Wilson, I think, I'm not going to say he's an every week play yet, but in matchups like these, certainly is.
Yeah, I think he's just like a good pickup in general, right? So it doesn't have to be just for this week if your quarterback is struggling, especially like a CJ Stroud, if you're sick of it.
Yeah.
Even though I keep holding out hope. I keep thinking like Stroud, I'm going to have ranked high again this week against Cowboys, but that's besides the point. Bo Nix is another option for a streaming quarterback. 2 not so great fantasy weeks in a row.
Yeah.
But prior to that, 3 out of 4 really good weeks for him. The Falcons are allowing the 7th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks this season. I'm not thrilled about it, but I do think he's a viable option.
Yeah, the other thing the Falcons do is they can allow rushing yards to quarterbacks, and Bo Nix will take off and run. I mean, let's give Bo Nix a break. Those are 2 very tough matchups for a rookie back-to-back, playing at the Ravens, playing at the Chiefs, 2 of the 2 best teams essentially in the AFC last year. So when you look at it, it's a lot easier, right, to take an NFC opponent on. He's really done well against the NFC. If you look back, they beat the Buccaneers. Panthers obviously was a rollover game. So the Broncos are a good team against bad teams, and they get a team that I think is a little bit inflated, and the Falcons are winning mainly because their division stakes. So I think the Broncos are going to be fine. They'll probably win this game and look good doing it. So I look at Bo Nix having a nice game as well.
And then one we haven't mentioned, but Justin Herbert, he's still available in over 50% of leagues. If he's still out there, he's scored at least 21 fantasy points in 3 straight weeks, gets a great matchup against the Bengals. So like he's even ahead of Russell Wilson. He should be picked up for sure if he's available, but he's not out there in many leagues, but he still is out there for the majority of leagues, which is crazy. People might consider Will Levis because he had, 19 fantasy points last week, 2 touchdowns, but like, no, not against the Vikings. It seems like, the Vikings give up a lot of yards. They only give up 13.7 points per game to quarterbacks this season, 7th fewest. Do not go in the Will Levis boat. I would say if I'm going to get risky with a guy like that, I'm going with Jameis Winston against the Saints because we saw a huge week from him against the Ravens. We know he can do it. And yeah, the Saints played fine on defense against the Falcons for 1 game, but that's what happens when you change when you change coaches. Like the Saints change their coach, they get excited for 1 game, and then typically it falls back apart. So I'm not like thinking the Saints are going to be this great defense all of a sudden.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little torn on Winston. Again, it's a revenge game. I don't know if that comes into play, the defensive scheme, knowing the quarterback. I don't know all that going on. I'm not going to be banging the table to play Winston, but if you're desperate, and again, you're looking for a 1-week play, you've been riding Kyler Murray or Baker Mayfield, that's maybe where you could go this season. Now, speaking of 1-week plays, you probably have some concerns if you have Trey McBride off. Another guy, Cade Otton, has been crushing it as well this season. So these are 2 guys that have been awesome late. So if you're looking for a replacement or potentially Dalton Kincaid being hurt and missing a game, you could look directly to the Bills and Dawson Knox. The Chiefs gives up a lot of points to the tight end. The Bills could be without not only Dalton Kincaid, but Amari Cooper and Keon Coleman yet again. So it really would funnel a lot of targets there to Dawson Knox. Now, Will Dissly is the other option, so not that exciting, but they're playing the Bengals. It's a good matchup, and he actually led the team, believe it or not, in production, even though he didn't have the big plays, 5 of 6 for 30 yards last week. I know it's not a lot, but if you're looking for some cheap production from this position without spending a lot, that's where you go.
Yeah, I think both of those options are fine. I think I definitely agree there with Dawson Knox. I think that's your best bet. It should be a really high-scoring game. The Bills' weapons are all banged up, so they're going to need Knox. Another option, I think, is Dalton Schultz. It's not going to be a high ceiling play at all, but he did have 66 receiving yards this past week. And they get the Cowboys. It should be an easy matchup. I do think Stroud will be better. And they allowed, Goddard to score a receiving touchdown last week. So maybe Schultz can finally score one. But those are really your best options out there. What about streaming defenses? The Packers get the Bears. So if they're available after their bye, go get them. I mean, we know they're so good at turnovers, but yeah, against the Bears, that's going to be great. I also think another great one is the Texans against the Cowboys. The Texans defense hasn't been as good of late. Maybe when they were playing the Lions, people got scared and dropped them, or maybe they just weren't picked up at all. But against the Cowboys, that's also a great play too.
Yeah, they got those interceptions, we know, against Jared Goff. So that was their best game of the season that they played. Yeah. So that was helpful. But the Packers surprisingly were available in more than half of leagues. They've been a pretty solid defense this week or this season. With Xavier McKinney forcing turnovers, the Bears gave up 9 sacks last week to a Patriots team that wasn't very good in defense. So that tells you the Packers can have some success. I also like the Dolphins. They impressed me a little bit the way they got after Matthew Stafford. They get the Raiders, so we might have Desmond Ridder starting in that game in Miami, which I also like. Rams get the Patriots. Their defense looked pretty good, also containing a lot of what the Dolphins were doing. They got a lot of young playmakers there, Jared Verse on the back end and all that good stuff. And then Michelle may not like this play, but the Saints are out there only because they're seeing old friend Jameis Winston, who can throw interceptions. So I had to mention them. I don't know how motivated they'll be. I think that's their desperate look after you get past the Packers, Dolphins, Rams, Texans. Then you look at the Saints if your league is greedy or those guys are not available.
Yeah, you'd have to play in a very, very deep league to think about the Saints. Because, they could get 4 interceptions on Winston. They could also allow Winston to throw for 5 touchdowns of 400.
It could both happen.
And either side could happen.
They both could happen in the same game with Jameis Winston.
Just flip the coin and who knows what you get there. But you would have to be very, very ballsy in a very deep league to go that way. But it could end up great for sure. that is it for today's episode. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Everydayers, please hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Also give us a like on whatever podcast app you're listening to. We'd greatly appreciate it. We will talk to you tomorrow when we start our Week 11 rankings. Have a great night, everybody. Bye, y'all.